You're listening to the Christ Our Cornerstone podcast, a ministry of Christ Our Cornerstone Church in O'Neill, Nebraska. I'm Pastor Logan Merrick, and it's our prayer that this message strengthens your faith and draws you closer to Christ. Let's dive in.
So now let's look back at verse 17 just for a moment. Hopefully you've got a Bible. If you don't, it'll be right up here before you, but we do have Bibles in the back. Would love for you to take one. It is our gift to you. And so Jonah, chapter 1, verse 17 says, "And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights." Now, why is the 3 days, 3 nights? Why is that relevant? What do we talk about? It foreshadows Jesus, right? It's foreshadowing the death of Jesus. And we're going to actually look more at the foreshadowing of the death of Jesus through Jonah's prayer. All right? So, first and foremost, I asked Micah the other day, I said, hey, do you think that it's possible that Jonah was swallowed by a whale? And without thinking, he just goes, yeah. And I go, really? You think so? He goes, have you ever seen a whale? Whales are big. Seems pretty cut and dry to me. I'm like, all right. But I think that when we look at the book of Job, it talks about Leviathan, this beast, this monster, the sea monster of chaos that only God can control. I believe that God used Leviathan. He appointed him to go and to swallow up Jonah. And so Jonah is now in the belly of the whale, or fish, Leviathan. So let's go chapter 2, verse 1. We're going to read the entire thing, and then I will start back at the beginning. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress. If you've got a highlighter, highlight that. And he answered me, out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight. You should highlight and circle that. Yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life, and the deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought my life up from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope and of steadfast love. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. All right. So today we're unpacking Jonah's prayer. This kind of idea that I'm going to drive home for you guys is no matter how far we've fallen, God's grace reaches deeper and is available to all who call him sincerely. I have, since I was a small child, for whatever reason, I hate to be alone. And so when I was a little kid, if I even thought that I was alone in my house, I would panic and I would have severe panic attacks. And so I hate being alone. And now as an adult, like, yeah, I don't mind being alone. But if Tracy goes on a retreat or something like that, and, she's gone for any long periods of time, she'll tell you, like, I get anxious, but in a way that's like, I need someone to talk to. I cannot stand silence. I hate it with everything in me, except for when I'm hunting. Outside of that, I hate silence. When I'm doing sermon prep, when I'm writing, or even in my own prayer time, I have to have some sort of like something that can't distract me, but I have to have some kind of sound that's going. When I'm sleeping, my wife can tell you this, I sleep with a show, a book, anything going, because I cannot stand silence. And so why do I share that with you? Because there's many times in my life where God will shut things off. He will shut me in and force me to listen. Does anybody else know what I'm talking about? Have you ever been shut off from everything and finding yourself going, oh man, this is very uncomfortable. And the Lord's like, yeah, I know. And in your discomfort, we're going to have a conversation. And so that's happened to me many times, and specifically when I was touring and God was telling me it's time to come home and get off the road and no longer be away from your family and all these things. It took God ripping all the things away. And he's like, hey, you are worshiping your own fame. You wear this fake mask of Christianity. You stand up on a stage. You play for your own glory, not for mine. You slap my name on it to sell things. We need to have a conversation because what's happening here is it's your own self-glorification, and you actually aren't worshiping me. You're worshiping yourself. And so I'm going to strip everything away, and I'm going to pull the mask from your face, and I'm going to make you see that it's me, not you. Does that make sense? That's where Jonah is right now. God's like, you've ran. Now I'm going to appoint a fish to swallow you up, and it's going to be just me and you, brother. In the stomach of this fish, just me and you. You ever have those come to Jesus meetings? Yeah? Yeah, man. God will strip everything away. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but God will strip it all away. And the thing is Jonah has this fish, right, that rescues Jonah. When I say rescue, it's not the rescue he wanted, right? It's not the rescue he wanted, but it's the rescue that he needed. And so sometimes God's greatest mercy looks like our greatest nightmare. And so I'm calling this the theology of the belly. We often think of prayer as an act of devotion, a sweet hour of prayer where we come to God out of love, but that isn't what happened with Jonah. Jonah didn't pray when he boarded the ship to Tarshish. He didn't pray when the storm was breaking the boat apart. He didn't even pray when he was being tossed into the sea. Jonah only prayed when? What does it say? Let's look back. Verses 1 and 2. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord in my what? In my distress. Does that sound like affection for the Lord? No, that sounds like affliction. And so, Jonah only prayed when he ran out of options. How many of us will do all the things? We will distract ourselves in all the ways, whatever it looks like. Work, family, distraction, whether it's football, sports, whatever it may be, careers. We can distract ourselves so much, and then when God takes that away to get your attention, all of a sudden you start praying. But you're not praying out of the affection that you have for the Lord. You're praying out of the affliction. And so this wasn't a cry of affection. It was a cry of desperation. Jonah was a prophet, a man of the cloth, and a man who knew the right answers. Yet his heart was miles away from God. He was caught up in his own fame, his own nationalism, and his own self-sufficiency. He thought he was the hero of his own story. But God had to take Jonah to the belly of Sheol. What is Sheol? Hell. Now, you can be like, Pastor Logan, he wasn't like that's figurative, right? No, he was in hell, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. So to the roots of the mountains, wrapped in seaweed and darkness, God doesn't crush him, but he does deconstruct him, and not in the way that we have this popular deconstruction with Christians nowadays. That's not what I'm talking about. He is destructing, he's performing deconstruction in his messed up theology. Because as you guys, you've heard me say it over and over and over again, there's a difference between knowledge and knowledge. A lot of us in here have a lot of this, don't got a lot of this. We know God and doctrine and theology in the scriptures here, but it hasn't necessarily penetrated the heart, which is why Ezekiel sees the vision of a new heart being placed. Because it takes a new heart. And so God appoints this fish to stop Jonah in his tracks because Jonah was moving too fast towards his own destruction. And so God will appoint a fish in your life. It could be a job loss, a broken relationship, a season of silence to bring you to a place of forced quietness. So he does this to show you who you really are, not the person that you're pretending to be. Now, let me tell you, it's real easy in ministry to wear this fake facade. And so I jokingly said about, being upset about the game, and being frustrated with the Huskers. And I sent a text to Vicky and Lowell and apologizing. But in reality, they saw who my family sees every day. They don't see the facade that is here. They saw part of who I really am, broken and messed up. And so the thing is all of us wear a facade of some kind. There can be a lot of men in this room that come across as great fathers and great husbands, but when you get them home, they're brutal. They're either abusive or they're distant. They're not who they claim to be. I mean, for crying out loud, we've seen legitimately serial killers who were elders in their church. I mean, I know that's an extreme, but do you see what I'm saying? It comes down to this. We wear a fake facade that is not real in front of everyone else, and God will do everything he can to save you from yourself. And so he will break the facade. And so if you're unwilling to break the facade, just know he will, and it's not going to feel good. How many pastors have you seen just in the last year? Famous pastors got massive platforms. The facade came down because they were unwilling to bring the facade down themselves. And so just know, the scriptures are clear. Your sins will find you out. It says that in Numbers. So if you're unwilling to take the facade off, God will do everything he can. He's going to strip it all away, and he's going to force you to be still and be quiet. And he goes, all right, it's time to get real. And that's where Jonah is now. Now, I want to talk about for just a second. There's this thing called, have you guys ever heard of cheap grace and costly grace? Have you ever heard of that before? That comes from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, theologian. He died as a martyr in World War II. But he has this, and this is a great book. Write this down if you want to read it. It's one that I've read several times, and it's always a good reminder. But he has a book called The Cost of Discipleship. And in it, he starts the entire book like this. He says, cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ, living and incarnate. But costly grace is the treasure hidden in the field. For the sake of it, man will gladly go and sell all that he has. And so what is he saying? Most of us live with cheap grace in mind. We live the facade with cheap grace in mind. It didn't cost us anything. We don't care. But he's like, there are those who understand what they've been saved from. They've been broken. They've been quieted. And they understand the costly grace of what it cost God. And so they live differently. This, of what is happening with Jonah, is Jonah had been experiencing cheap grace, the grace that he was unwilling to give to the Ninevites. That's cheap grace. But now he's experiencing costly grace because God has literally taken him to the pit of hell. And so this is where we often get everything wrong in the modern church. Cheap grace is the idea that God is a nice guy. He overlooks our sin because it's no big deal. But the grace Jonah finds is the dark and costly grace. It is grace that identifies the jacked up way we see God and demands we change. It's the grace that strips the mask off because it loves the person under the mask too much to let them live a lie. This grace cost God everything. It cost him his son. And when you are in the belly of your own personal fish, you realize that you aren't being punished. You're being purged. You are being shown a grace so deep that once you taste it, you can't keep your mouth shut about it. You stop playing church and you start living in the reality of a Savior who went into the real Sheol, the real hell, so that you could come out of yours. Have you ever met someone who was, let me back up. First off, you don't have to have a crazy testimony to experience costly grace. Here's what I mean. You don't have to have a testimony of you've been saved from years of black tar heroin, right? But I've met drug addicts, prostitutes, people who have these crazy testimonies. And when they come to know the costly grace of Jesus, they are forever changed, and they're forever changed in a way that they constantly can't stop talking about Jesus. You know what I'm talking about? And I'll look at it and be like, man, I wish I was on black tar heroin to have a story like that. Not really, right? And one day I had to, because I can't remember why we were having this conversation at our house. But I think it was Aria that said something about like not really having a testimony. She's just known Jesus. And she's got a pretty awesome dad and mom, you know. But she's like, but we don't really like have like a testimony. And at first I'm like, oh yeah, you know. But then the Holy Spirit was like, no, that is a testimony. That's a testimony to the goodness of God. God's like, it's the costly grace. You still have to live it out and understand that you've been saved from yourself. So you don't have to have this crazy story. But what I want you to hear, though, is if you have experienced costly grace, you should live in a way that you know you've experienced costly grace. You won't shut up about it. You're constantly talking about it. The only people who hate when people are constantly talking about the goodness of God and what they've been saved from are the people who love cheap grace. And so what happens? The people who have experienced costly grace ultimately get beat into submission by the people that love cheap grace because they don't want to be reminded. So I'm going to ask you, examine yourself. What type of grace are you living under? Point number 2. Wait, hold on. I don't think I gave point number 1. Did I? I did? Yes. Oh, cool. All right, cool. A cry of affliction, not affection. Hopefully Dustin was on it because I wasn't. All right, point number 2. Don't anybody email me on this, all right? If you do, my email address is k.tomjack@gmail.com. Distance can be hell. Now, I mean that in the way of both, like to get your attention, but also the literal hell. So let's look at verses 3 through 5. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight. Verse 5. Yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life, and the deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. And so Jonah gets what he asked for, right? What was he asking for? To be distant from God, right? He wanted away from him. So God's like, all right, thy will be done. Right? Except wasn't exactly what Jonah wanted. And so Jonah acknowledges a terrifying reality. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas. So we have to remember that Jonah was a fugitive. He wasn't just on a boat. He was on a quest for distance. He wanted to get so far away from the presence of God that God would finally just stop pursuing him. That's what's funny about all of this. God does not stop pursuing until the end. He wanted God to leave him alone. I'm going to ask you, have you ever been there? Have you ever just wanted God to leave you alone? Charles Spurgeon calls him the hound of heaven. He doesn't stop pursuing. Have you ever been there? He just keeps coming up. That's why I love when you hear Phil Robertson's testimony and he just talks about how God pursued him over and over. And he kept pushing him away and pushing him away. And God still kept pursuing him and kept pursuing him. And so you can want distance from God, and he will give you distance, but he will also continue to keep pursuing. But then there will come a time where, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute, where he will stop pursuing. And so maybe you've thought, if I could just get far enough away from the church stuff or the conviction, I could finally just live my life in peace. But Jonah discovers a horrifying paradox. God eventually gives us what we want. So here's the reality of hell. I want everyone to pay attention. If you zoned out on me, this is what you need to hear more than anything, because this is literally life or death. And so people often argue, they'll bring this to me as a pastor, that a loving God would never send someone to a place of eternal torment and darkness. Have you heard that before? If God is so loving, he would not send someone to eternal damnation. What you have to understand is the most terrifying part of hell is distance from God. You can be like, I don't think that doesn't sound too bad. When you know that God is literal light, love, justice, and mercy, it's terrifying. The flames and the fires of hell are but just a portion of the torture, because it's the other that is terrifying. And so I would say we misunderstand the nature of hell. Hell is not God being unloving. It is God being just, and he's just enough to respect our choice. He is so just and good that he's like, okay, this is what you want. I'm giving you that. You truly want distance from me. Why would I put you in a place of eternity with me in my presence? And so, if you spend your entire life running from God saying, leave me alone, eventually God will say, thy will be done. As Jonah sinks into the heart of the seas, he's experiencing a physical manifestation of hell. It is darkness, it is despair, and it is the absolute absence of the light of God's presence. Hell is simply the place where God is no longer there to restrain the darkness. Is God there? Yes. But is he there to restrain the darkness? No. So you keep asking for God to go away, he'll give you what you want, and he'll stop restraining the darkness. And so here's a warning. This should be up here if you want to write this down. We think that distance from God will bring us freedom. But as Jonah found out, the distance only brings the flood and the billows. Sin promises a playground. It delivers a grave. It gives you exactly what you asked for, but it turns out to be nothing what you hoped for. And so, but here's the good news. Let me pause for just a second. The reason why this perfectly encapsulates in the words that Jonah uses, he uses water going down, right? So literally God takes him, again, we're going down more. So God takes him literally to the base of the ocean. And so water and mountains, he uses both of those things. And so in Hebrew culture, they believe that Sheol, so mountains represent God and going up to the sanctuary of God. And ultimately, that's why you see Moses go on top of a mountain and God visits him there. Throughout all the Old Testament, even into the New Testament, the transfiguration happens on a mountain. So there's tons and tons of mountains. It's supposed to be God's footstool. They believe that Eden was on a mountain. And so at the base of the mountain, they believe is where angels and supernatural beings kind of come in and out. So you heard of Jacob's ladder, right? And so they believe it's at the base of the mountain, and underneath mountains and in oceans, that is Sheol. That's hell. So it's not figurative, like they believe that's exactly where it is. Is that where it's at? I don't know. Sounds good to me. So when he's literally going down, He is literally in a physical manifestation of what the Hebrews understood hell to be. Utter darkness, utter despair, and completely distant from God. And so, but here's the beautiful thing. What does God do? We read it, right? So what does God do? He takes him there. Jonah begins to pray. What happens? What did it say? Where does Jonah, what ultimately happens to Jonah? He's thrown up onto the shore. So we see that God's mercy happens. You can be like, that doesn't seem like mercy. We'll get to that. And so the reach of the sovereign hand, even in the depths, Jonah realizes something profound. So if you look at verse 4, it says, I have been cast out from your sight, yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. Even when Jonah felt he had finally succeeded in losing God, he realized he couldn't outrun God's sovereignty. He was cast out, but he wasn't wiped out. And so ultimately, this is Jonah saying, yeah, I'm not dead yet. I'm here in hell. This is awful. And so this tells me I should probably do the thing you're telling me to do. And so this is the tension of the gospel. So you've got the justice of God. God allows you to feel the weight of the distance you chose. But then you've got the mercy of God. His hand is never too short to reach into the dark. And so I want you to hear me. Don't wait until the weeds are wrapped around your head to realize that the distance you're craving is actually killing you. You might be in a sinful lifestyle right now that feels like freedom, but if you look closely, the water is rising. You're experiencing a personal hell, one of your own making. Anxiety, fear, and a hollowed out soul is happening. And so Jonah's only hope, and your only hope, is to stop swimming away and start looking back towards his holy temple. And so you don't have to wait until you've hit the bottom to call out. So, but if you are at the bottom, know this: the God of grace is a deep sea diver. He goes down to the depths to pull up the runaways. One of my favorite C.S. Lewis, it's a very short book, story. It's called The Great Divorce. And The Great Divorce is about this man who's getting on a bus, and he's lived in this very gray town. And in this gray town, you've got people like Napoleon Bonaparte, who never leaves his home, and he's constantly running around his house and trying to find things to conquer. And he's trapped inside his home. And so he lives in this very gray town, and the people are always arguing. And so they're fighting to get on this bus. They get on the bus, and as the bus begins to take them up, they arrive at heaven. All this time, they've had no idea that they're dead. And so they go up. They have people that come out to greet them that they've known in their life, and the people that they've known are people that maybe had, like, one guy experiences a guy who murdered a friend of his, and the murderer is in heaven, and he's like, "How can you be here and I'm down there?" And he's like, the grace of Jesus. Right before I died, I was a terrible man, and he starts telling the goodness of God. And he's like, "You've got to come with me. You've got to come with me. You've got to come with me." And so you get all these different stories of all these people that they're being begged, just come. And it says that the people that were in hell, they're just these kind of mystical spirits, but the people in heaven are real. And when the spirits try to start walking towards the city, the grass is made of crystal, and it's very hard on their feet. And a lot of them either reject going because they're like, "I don't want to be there. I don't want any of that. I'm fine where I'm at." And then others try, and they're like, "This is painful. I'm not doing this." And then there's only one or two that actually accept it, and they experience the pain to ultimately go and be in front of God in his holy city. And so it's a really cool book, but in it, there's this illustration of the journey of the souls from hell to heaven. And many of the souls reject heaven, preferring their isolation and their autonomy that they had in hell. They are unwilling to give up their preferences, illustrating how the ultimate desire to be left alone can lead to self-imposed exile from God's love and presence. And so this poignant narrative reminds us that hell is not a torture chamber, but rather the tragic fulfillment of our choice to be distant from God. Now you'd be like, Pastor Logan, are you saying that you don't believe in eternal torment? No, I do. I think that C.S. Lewis is just giving us an illustration that the worst part is the distance from God. And so Lewis has this quote, "There are only two kinds of people in the end, those who say to God, 'Thy will be done,' and those to whom God says, 'In the end, thy will be done.' All that are in hell, choose it. Without their self-choice, there could be no hell." So, this should be right up here. Hell is the ultimate fulfillment of the human desire to be left alone by God. Just a couple more points. Point number 3, mercy swims in deep waters. So if we look verses 6 through 10, at the roots of the mountains, I went to the land and I went down. At the roots of the mountains, I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit. O Lord, my God, when my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But with the voice of thanksgiving, I will sacrifice to you, and I will have vowed what I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord, and the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto the dry land. And so here's something that's really incredible. Jonah sees the mercy seat of God in the deep. In hell, he sees the mercy seat of God. What is the mercy seat? So Jonah finds himself at the roots of the mountains, a place where earth's bars were closing in on him forever. In this pit, he remembers the mercy seat of God. Where's the mercy seat? A little Old Testament quiz going on. Ark of the Covenant, right? So in the Ark of the Covenant, you've got these angels that sit on top of the Ark of the Covenant, right? And it goes out, and on that is the mercy seat. And so what happens on the mercy seat? Well, the sacrifice is made, the blood is sprinkled onto the mercy seat. And this is a representation of Christ. And so as I was preparing for this, I couldn't stop thinking about, remember that song in the 90s? I don't remember her name. I should have wrote it down, but it went, I'm running to the mercy seat. You guys know that song? Where Jesus is called. Everybody's looking at me like, you don't want to sing it, man?
But I don't know who sang it, but I do know.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, but I don't want to sing it. But it says, I'm running to the mercy seat where Jesus is calling. He will provide the healing. I'm running to the mercy seat. It says that his blood will flow freely and he will provide my healing. And so I was like, man, that's Jonah right now. Like he's going, I'm running to the mercy seat. I am running to the mercy seat, begging Jesus, begging the Father, please, I'm stupid. Forgive me. There's a couple people that were like, Jonah is saying, can we all agree? Like, he's being stupid. He's running from God, and he did everything he could, and now he finds himself in his own self-made hell. And now he's crying out to God. He's not stupid now, but he was. Pastor Logan's been stupid many times. I grow from it, hopefully. It's the grace of God. And so Jonah knows exactly what the lyrics of this song means. Because in the temple, the mercy seat was done the lid of the Ark of the Covenant, where the blood of the sacrifice was sprinkled to cover the sins of the people. And Jonah realizes that he doesn't need a better plan. He doesn't need a better boat, and he doesn't need a better reputation. He needs a sacrifice. He needs God to step in. So even in the deepest, darkest hell of your own making, mercy is swimming there. You cannot outsink the reach of God's grace. And so, but there's this funny part in verse 8. Does anyone find that this part to be kind of strange? Like, he's talking about mercy, right? And I see your holy temple, and you've brought me up from out of the pit. He's essentially quoting Psalms, by the way. But then he says in verse 8, those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But does anyone feel like that's kind of a strange, like, we're rolling along, he's saying a prayer, he's talking about the mercy of God, he's quoting the Psalms and being rescued, and then he talks about vain idols? Does anyone else find that to be a strange, like it feels like a hiccup? So, theologians they're split, but I will tell you where I stand. So there are those that say, yeah, Jonah was talking about his own idolatry, his own political idolatry, and his own fame idolatry. And so he's saying, I'm rejecting all those things. I don't agree with that. I believe that he is talking about the Ninevites, that he is looking at it and once again being self-righteous, that he wants that costly grace while offering cheap grace. Why do I think that? Well, I know the end of the story and how it ends, but also it says, but I will be the one that makes sacrifices. I will be the good Christian, right? And so, an idol is anything you look to for meaning, for worth, security that only God can provide. And as people, as spouses, and as professionals, we turn our careers and our self-image into sin factories. And here's the difference. This will be up here. An idol will always eventually sacrifice you on its own altar. Your idol, if your idol is your legacy, what you're leaving behind. By the way, leaving behind a legacy is not a bad thing. It is a good thing. It is a godly thing. It is in Genesis. We see it. Leaving behind inheritances and wanting to have a legacy. None of that stuff is bad. But when that thing becomes all important to you of having this legacy to be remembered, when people forget about you, you will be crushed by it. If your idol is your own self-sufficiency, it will abandon you when you fail. But God is the only God who puts himself on the altar for the sake of the idolater. So here's the problem with Jonah and with us. Is Jonah truly repentant? Or is he still just playing church? So like I said, I think that he is talking about the Ninevites' own pagan, idolatrous ways. He's seeing himself as worthy to be saved and the Ninevites unworthy to be saved. He's saying, their wickedness is way worse than mine. I'm worthy of being saved. I'm on the all-star team. I'm a prophet. I'm a mouthpiece of God. I should get the costly grace, but they should not. And so how often do we do this? We want God's grace for our own mistakes, but we want God's judgment for the other people. We want costly grace for ourselves, but we offer that cheap grace or no grace at all. So Jonah's still acting a fool. Thank you for somebody that at least laughed. But even in his imperfection, he still lands on one truth that changes everything. Verse 9, what does it say? Somebody read it out. Tell me. The very last line. What is that very last line in verse 9? Salvation belongs to the Lord. He is quoting the Psalms. That is the entirety. If you were to sum up all of the Bible in one verse, if you said, sum it up, give me the thesis statement, Pastor Logan, it's that. Salvation belongs to the Lord. You cannot save yourself. He is the one that does it for you. He does the heavy lifting. He is the one that saves. And so J.I. Packer in his book, Knowing God, says this: we have seen why the thought of grace means so little to some church people, namely because they do not share the beliefs about God and man which it presupposes. Now we have to ask, why should this thought mean so much to others? The answer is not far to seek. Indeed, it is evident from what has already been said. It is surely clear that once a person is convinced that his state and his need are as described, the New Testament gospel of grace cannot but sweep him off his feet with wonder and joy, for it tells how our judge has become our Savior. If you did not understand what he's saying, he's ultimately saying this. When you come to the realization that you are not good and you desperately need Christ to save you, you're not any better than the person next door. That's when grace sweeps you off your feet and you cannot be overwhelmed with wonder and joy, because then you understand that the judge who can totally destroy your soul has now become your Savior. So wrapping up right here, I have this subtitle, The Great Puke, a foreshadowing of Christ. Jonah couldn't swim out of the fish. He couldn't bargain his way out. Only God could speak to the monster. When verse 10 says that the fish vomited Jonah upon the dry land, it's not just a gross detail, it's a prophecy. Anybody want to guess why it's a prophecy? Because Jesus himself called this the sign of Jonah. Just as the fish couldn't hold Jonah, the grave couldn't hold Jesus. Death swallowed Christ, but Christ could not be shut up, for he spoke to death and Sheol, and it vomited him forth. And when he rose, he didn't come alone. He broke the bars of the pit and brought with him everyone who had been waiting for the true mercy seat. And so, here's my call to you. I'm going to ask that you stop playing church. I'm going to ask that if you have been here with a mask on, you are not who you claim to be. Only your spouse knows that, or your kids or grandkids know that. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Stop playing church. You're only drowning. Stop feeding the vain idols of your reputation and your self-reliance, because they're not going to save you. They'll let you sink. I want you to experience the costly grace that doesn't just pat you on the back, but pulls you out of the grave. So the hand of God is reaching out to you right now to pull you from your own personal hell. And I have this quote. It's from Martin Lloyd-Jones, famous pastor and theologian. It is grace at the beginning and grace at the end, so that when you and I come to lie upon our deathbeds, the one thing that should comfort and help us and strengthen us, there is the thing that helped us in the beginning. Not what we have been, not what we have done, but the grace of God in Jesus Christ our Lord. The Christian life starts with grace, it continues with grace, and it ends with grace. Grace, wondrous grace. By the grace of God, I am what I am, yet not I, but the grace of God, which was with me. So what he's saying is this: it's grace that saves you, not works. It's grace that continues your sanctification, not your works. And it's grace that will sustain you in your death, on your deathbed and into heaven. And so if you're here and you've been playing church and you've not actually experienced the costly grace of God, I would ask that you would remove the mask and be real with yourself and respond. Let's pray.